On Saturday, April the 16th, 1988, Alberta Leach woke from her sleep at 6:30 a.m. in Linwood, Kansas, a sparsely populated farming community. There was nothing untoward, other than her son Randy was not in the house, and on looking out to the driveway, she noticed the car she had last seen him in, her own, wasn't there either. This was uncommon, and a feeling of angst overcame her. She notified her husband Harold, and both walked out onto their driveway, in one of those acts people often do when unsure of their next move. The two concerned parents decided to call Alberta's brother, a police officer in Lawrence, Kansas, and he came over to aid in their initial search for answers. They knew that Randy had gone to a party the night before. The three therefore made their way over to this house. On arrival, Alberta walked over to a woman who was cleaning an area where a bonfire had been the night before.
And I asked the woman, I had never met her before, they were just new people in the area, and she said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "I want to know where Randy Leach is." And she said, "Well, he was here, but he left." "Mrs. Leach, can I get you a beer?" "No, ma'am, I want to know where my son is." And she said, "Well, somebody took him home, or he took somebody else home. We don't know."
The woman mentioned was Annie Irwin. Her daughter was a classmate of Randy's, and the party had taken place with permission. Knowing that they wouldn't get any information from here, they hopped in their car and looked elsewhere. In the preceding hours and days, family members from the surrounding area joined them in the search for Randy. They also tried to get as much information from those who attended the party that may lead them towards something tangible. Family and friends were forced to take these steps because police, according to the family, paid little attention and simply thought it was a young man who had gone off gallivanting. Their world had been turned upside down, and no one was interested. As we will see, it went past disinterest. Something strange may have been at work. The day before his disappearance, all was as normal. Randy, a tall and athletic 17-year-old, was close to graduating from high school. At 6:45 p.m, he left his house to collect materials needed for a John Deere mower his father had just purchased for him the day before. When he left the house, he was wearing a blue t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of white tennis shoes. It's known that he stopped at a body shop in the nearby township of DeSoto at 8:30 p.m. with his 32-year-old friend, Steve Doherty. They were there to look at a red 1966 Mustang vehicle, which he was having restored. It was a graduation present from his parents. It's also been reported that he was with another man by the name of Jim Hatley, though this has not been confirmed. After looking at the car, it's known that Randy's next stop was Steve's house. He dropped him off and went to a convenience store where he purchased gas, 2 candy bars and 2 Pepsis, indicating that he was buying for himself and someone else. It was between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. when he reached a gathering that has been described as a pre-graduation bonfire party. The party was in West Bonner Springs, approximately 5 miles from where Randy lived. Attendees at the party have suggested that Randy was heavily intoxicated. Accounts of him nearly falling into the bonfire have been circulated. The owner of the property, Annie Irwin, described him as having some difficulty when walking. Others were told by the young man that he felt off, but he didn't know why. In later years, this has led some to believe he was spiked. Others have said that the punch was definitely laced with vodka or grain alcohol, but those at the party seem to have been cognizant of this. After all, it's been reported that a serving of the punch was being sold to attendees for $3. At 1:30 a.m, a friend of Randy's, John Burns, offered to take him home. However, the 17-year-old was unable to find his keys, so Burns took somebody else home and planned to return later for Randy. But on returning at 2:30 a.m, Randy was gone, as was the car he used to get to the party, a 1985 grey Dodge 600 four-door sedan with a Kansas license plate which read as follows: LV J8 721. In subsequent inquiries, it's been determined that not one of the 70 to 150 guests that night saw either he or his car leave. At least no one was willing to admit of this detail. The last reported sighting came from Annie Irwin, the resident occupant, who said she saw him waiting to enter the toilet at about 2:05 a.m. She said he was intoxicated. When his parents arrived at the Irwin house the following morning, accompanied by police officer Richard Rose, Alberta's brother, they noticed some things that were odd. Officer Rose later said, "The ground was swept and raked, and everything put away. No cups or cans. You couldn't even have told there was a party there." Local newspaper articles have suggested that there was 2 unconfirmed sightings linked to Randy's disappearance. Both are worth mentioning. One took place at Bonner Springs High School. The second involved the sighting of a grey car driving erratically down Iowa Street in the nearby town of Lawrence. Nothing of any note has been said since on these 2 sightings. So we will move on and discuss what might have happened in the early hours of April 16th. There seems to be 3 possibilities. 1. Randy got into an accident of his own making, possibly while under the influence of alcohol or drugs. 2. Randy went with other people elsewhere, or to another get-together, and there was an accident which people have covered up, due to fears that they will be held responsible. And lastly, 3. There was an intentional murder at the premises, devised over a period of time, which has been covered up by one or more people. Regarding the first possibility, a news report was published based on an interview with Timothy Dennis, a former agent of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Dennis recalls that this was a case that captivated him from the start. In the interview, he quotes Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, saying that his motivation was to remove all the possibilities. He is then of the opinion that whatever remains, however improbable, is the truth. In a case like this, I'm not sure the truth can be discovered by inference, particularly given the lack of consistent and precise facts about the events of that night, but it's worth considering the plausibility of his theory. It starts with the presumption that a cover-up is impossible. As he put it, and I quote, "Nobody's talked, no evidence, no car. Those things don't happen in criminal cases, unless the CIA hit team came in," end quote. This is a fair point. It seems unlikely that a group of drunk and high teenagers could hide an accidental or intentional death for over 33 years. However, we must also recognise that accounts have been given. The problem is that they are tangled up in inconsistencies and contradictions. Under such circumstances, it's possible that truthful accounts were drowned out by less accurate ones. Dennis admits that we don't know how he left the party. James Burns had seen him in the front of his car at 2 a.m, and he seemed to have left the car for a while, if we believe Annie Irwin, who saw him waiting to enter her bathroom at 2:05 a.m. In either case, neither Randy nor his car were present when James returned. As a result, Dennis deduces that Randy tried to drive home. Randy had 2 options for returning home. go north on Kansas 32, or go south on what is now known as Golden Road. According to Dennis, the latter alternative, the back road, is the least likely to be patrolled by cops, and therefore the most reasonable choice for anyone trying to avoid being pulled over. If Randy took this road home, he would have passed by Stranger Bridge, which has since been destroyed. Stranger Bridge was a one-lane bridge that crossed Stranger Creek, which flows into the Kansas River. On the approach to the bridge at the time, there were no guardrails. Randy, according to the former agent, lost control of his car and plunged into the water below. His colleagues at the time were dismissive of this version of events, believing the creek to be too shallow. But after seeing a car sink underwater in the same creek during the shooting of a movie scene, he believed it was plausible. We will look into this further piece of information shortly. If we are to take this theory and run with it, we have to ask, where is the car? They sent teams into the water to find the vehicle, and they did find one, but it was a Pontiac, not the Dodge they were searching for. There was a railway bridge further downstream that gave Dennis hope. When he first saw the pilings supporting the bridge, he thought they acted as a shield, preventing Randy's car from floating down the river. But this idea was disproved when a stolen car was discovered beyond this stage. Dennis stated, "This discovery meant that the searches conducted went from a manageable search area to an unreasonable area. Because if the current could push a vehicle this far, what's to keep it from pushing it 100 feet, 100 yards, or 100 miles? The family has raised a number of issues with this theory, all of which revolve around the water levels at the time of Randy's disappearance. According to Alberta Leach, that was the driest year, and there was no water in Stranger Creek at the time. Regarding the car falling down into the water in the 1987 scene from the film Kansas, which Dennis claims confirms his story's credibility, Alberta has stated that they didn't drive the car into Stranger Creek because it was too dry, and they had to film the scene at another creek. Add in the fact that the scene was shot nearly a year before Randy vanished. A lot can change in a year. The family argues that the report about Dennis's theory did more harm than good to the case. Retired detectives in touch with the family have stated that they must keep all lines of investigation open. A theory is a theory and nothing more, but they must all be tested. In terms of the second possibility stated, we know it may have occurred, but there is nothing conclusive to say it did. Former Detective Timothy Dennis's observation must be addressed. What are the chances that Randy's death was caused by a human-caused accident? The answer is, it is as likely as anything else. However, a second question that has been posed is, what are the chances that it will stay hidden after all these years? Surely someone in the know, haunted by guilt, will come forward, hold their hands up and confess. It all started with a lapse in judgment, and we didn't want to get into trouble. But they haven't. If this is the case, perhaps the manner in which they disposed of the body has kept them quiet for all these years. It can't be easy to admit that rather than come forward, they hid the events of that night by concealing or destroying a car and Randy. There are theories circulating around which suggest some of the partygoers had access to a crusher. Even if this is the case, we, like many others, find it difficult to believe that a whole group of adolescents will be able to remain silent and have the foresight and cunning to cover their tracks. The third theory revolves around something more premeditated, and judging this probability can be done from a variety of perspectives. The first idea we'd like to look at is one that gained a lot of traction in the years following Randy's disappearance: the satanic ritual connection. Most satanic ritual stories centre on caves near Loring Drive in Bonner Springs, which is east of the Irwin property where Randy was last seen. The cave has apparently been demolished. The account of ritual murder comes from a person who claims to have been kept prisoner in this cave while under the influence of drugs. He claims to have seen a body hanging in these caves while being threatened. He also believes he overheard someone say it was Randy Leach's body. According to certain sources, he passed a polygraph test, but police suspect he was hallucinating. A police search was undertaken, but no evidence was discovered indicating the sighting was real. Another story put forward is that Randy saw a drug deal and was either killed right away or died after being bound to a tree by those involved in the transaction. The cause of death was apparently dehydration, which could put the death in the accidental or intentional category. There doesn't seem to be anything else that can be used to prove this account's authenticity or weakness. There's also the chance that none of these accounts are correct. After all, there are a variety of explanations as to why Randy fell prey to someone wishing to hurt him, and with no physical proof to suggest one way or the other, all such reports are rumour and speculation. Rumour and speculation fueled by a series of events following his disappearance. The house fire that occurred at the property where Randy was last seen was one such event. It was claimed that it was deliberately lit, and that someone returned after it had already been burned to the ground and lit another fire. We haven't been able to find any more details. We can see why people believed it was an attempt to get rid of proof that might lead investigators in a certain direction, but once again, it's a dead end. Another piece of evidence which fueled speculation was the finding of a foot by Steve Doherty. The individual Randy had gone to DeSoto with the night before he vanished. It was still inside a white tennis shoe, but it didn't belong to Randy, as police determined years later using DNA. While we're on the subject of Steve Doherty, we should mention that he died 10 years later in mysterious circumstances, according to the Leach family. While an aneurysm was officially ruled as the cause of death, some have claimed that there was a gash on the top of his head, suggesting foul play. We know he wasn't at the party, but Harold Leach saw him drive past their house in an incredibly slow manner on the morning Randy went missing, as if checking to see if someone was there. The case resulted in 3 arrests, but all 3 were released without charge. One of those arrested is said to have left the region and joined the army as a result of the growing rumours of his involvement. He claims it was because of his unorthodox lifestyle, which included listening to heavy metal music, dressing differently from others, and having some occult books that attracted suspicion. From what we can see, the lack of concrete facts has resulted in a multitude of narratives about that night. Stories have been created in a vacuum, making it difficult to discern what is real and what is not. Before we wrap up the video, we'd like to recommend some YouTube videos that viewers might enjoy. Adventures with Purpose has done an excellent job of investigating and recording Randy Leach's disappearance, clearing a variety of locations that had been suggested as potential resting places for Randy and the car he was last seen in. They have also filmed conversations they have had with Harold and Alberta Leach. Finally, we would just like to say a few words about Randy. He was clearly a grounded, hard-working, honest young man with a bright future ahead of him. Inside the garage of the residence he walked out of 33 years ago sits a Mustang car which he was at pains to get into and drive. There's no doubt it would have taken him to places he never got the chance to see. The tragic nature of his disappearance is magnified by the years of hurt endured by both of his parents. Harold has recently passed on. His mother is now alone, without a husband, son, or answers. We can only pray that she gets them. Once again, thanks to everyone for watching. It's your support that gives us the motivation to keep uncovering cases such as this. If you enjoyed the video, please do make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe to Mystery Scope. As always, until the next time, take care.